As a next step for our tic-tac-toe game, we want the square component to remember that it was clicked and fill it with an X or an O mark. If a square has not yet been clicked, it is empty and it should have a value of null. To remember things, React components use a mechanism called state. Unlike props, which is data that comes from a parent component, state is data that originates from the component itself. This is why it is also referred to as local state. In React, we can use a feature called the useState hook in order to create and remember state. Let's add this feature in our code. We are in the index.js file. The useState hook is a named import in React, so let's import it at the top of our file. We will have the square component create and remember its own value as state. So we no longer need to pass down the value from the parent board component to the square component. We will delete the value prop. Save the file. We are no longer making use of the index I, so the value obtained via props in the square component is now undefined. Each square on the tic-tac-toe board no longer shows the index. We will use the useState hook in order to define the value as state in the square component itself. We want each square to remember if it has an X or an O when a player clicks on it, or a null value if no player has clicked on it. The useState hook is a function which we will call at the top of the square component. It takes the initial value of the state as an argument. In our case, we want the initial value to be null. This function returns an array with two values. We use the first value to get the state, and the second value to set the state. In our example, we will simply call the state getter value and the state setter set value. Note that the state setter set value is a function which takes the value that the state should be set to as its argument. Now we'll change the square's return expression to display the current state variable's value when clicked. First, let's remove the reference to props inside our button, since we are using the value state, not props. Second, we will set the state variable value when the user clicks on the square, and for the time being, we will set it to X. We can do this by updating the button onClick handler to make use of the setter function. Save the file. By calling setValue X from the onClick handler in the square's button, we are telling React to re-render the square whenever the button is clicked. After the user clicks on a square, the square's state value will be X, so we'll see the X on the game board for that square. Let's click on the square with index 2. We now have successfully implemented setting the square's state value to X when clicked by the user.